I first heard about IMSA. I was going to a tiny high school, parochial high school called Central Catholic High School in Bloomington, Illinois,
Okay, yep.
which was a great little high school. And I had a lot of friends there and was having a great time. But I didn't feel like the teachers ended up having to put me in other classes by myself. They would send me out of class to play around in the physics lab because I was I wasn't disruptive in a disciplinary way, but I was disruptive because I had too many questions about what the next thing was that we were going to learn about.
Okay.
And so they sent me off with books to explore on my own, which was great in its own way, but I knew that there were other smart kids out there that I could interact with if I could only find them. And then somebody from the guidance counselor's office gave me a brochure that had been passed out apparently to all the schools. And I brought it home, and I begged my parents to let me apply.
You did.
And they were a little worried. It seemed like a young age to let somebody go off to boarding school. But we came up and had the first meeting, I remember, over the course of, when was it, in July or something, before we actually started. And they knew that they could tell that I was so excited to come that they had to let me to come. So that's my story.
Okay. Wow. Great.
I can't remember exactly how I heard about it. I was going to the Elgin Academy, just a little bit up north in the Fox Valley. Both my parents were in education, so I think they were probably just keeping tabs on what was coming and saw this as a good opportunity and probably planted it in my brain without me realizing it. And then I convinced my best friend at Elgin Academy to apply with me, and we thought it would be fabulous to be roommates and that we would have a lot of fun away from home. And so we both applied, and I got in, and she did not, unfortunately. So that was a very rough moment. But so after looking at it, I mean, it was just such an amazing opportunity. It was really hard to say no and an adventure. So, and while Elgin Academy was a great school as well, nothing can compare to what the promise of this was, and then turned out to be academically. So. Even though it was difficult to leave her, I decided to come down for the adventure. So,
Okay.
Well, I went to Caleb High School, and I think I was spending about 15 minutes a night on homework and getting straight A's and a couple A pluses. And the guidance counselor told me, well, you can't add extra classes because they didn't have room, but I could work as a secretary in the office. And so I thought, okay, we need to look for something else here. So, I think I sort of applied on a whim and got in. And when we came to hear about the school, I remember being in the auditorium, and I remember one of the things that they promised us was a TV studio. And I thought, well, that sounded exciting. We didn't get it when we were there, but it just sounded like a fun adventure, and a little bit like going away to a long-term summer camp. And you've had this, or I had this feeling that, well, I could go and try it out and just sort of see what it was like. And I remember too, before we started, we were asked to read Megatrends.
That's right.
Oh, that's right. The summer reading.
And
Megatrends.
Did you ask
I'd
us to
love
read
to
that?
go back and read that now.
Who was it that asked us to read that?
Well, it was a collective staff. Because
Okay.
we had decided we only did that for a couple of years.
Okay.
But I still think it's a terrific idea that everybody reads the same thing at some point.
It was a great book too,
Yeah.
because reflecting back on it, I
Yeah.
think one of the major points was that that we were going to be entering the information age,
Right.
and that, of course, the internet. This was before email
Right.
and the internet, and so it'd be interesting to go back and read that now.
I see it every time I go into a thrift shop. It's
Yeah.
one of the books that's always
I've
there.
totally forgotten about that. That's true.
Yeah.
That was a very big decision. Did you have any idea about the academic environment when you talked about the IMSA promise? What did we promise beyond the TV studio?
Yeah.
What else did we promise that resonated with you? Because you're only 14 or 15. Sometimes when adults promise, it's yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, but I think if you have a drive for education and you enjoy it and you are smart and you're craving that knowledge, or if it's, of high value in your household, as I know it was in mine, you're constantly seeking that out. And even though I was going to what was considered a pretty good school, I wasn't always extremely challenged. And I think that this was described as a place that was kind of going to be almost a bridge between, it felt like a little bit of high school, a little bit of college.
Yeah,
And that was the feeling that we had, and I think that was exciting for all of us, and we all were kind of craving that, even if we didn't fully realize it in our young minds. It was something that we can tell was the right thing to do. And then we would all get terrified before coming back here every weekend, but then when we got here, we were fine again. That Sunday night angst, you know?
Well,
when
we
you
were
came
terrified too when you left, because I remember the first extended, Connie Hatcher and I went into all of your rooms, because there weren't any dorms, you were living here,
Yeah.
just to see if you had taken all your bed things with you,
Interesting.
Oh,
and would you come back?
wow.
We
Oh,
lost
yeah.
a lot of people that
Oh,
first
yeah, I
year.
mean, it was a real
How many
sense
did
of-
we? Did we know?
Well, you know, I can't remember.
Were there
We
any,
admitted
were the
210, I
defections
don't remember
worse
those.
in the beginning in
Yeah.
this
Well,
class?
you know, you know, they're real numbers, so I don't even want to speculate, because I don't remember losing a huge number. And now our quote-unquote attrition rate's around 14%. I don't think it was.
It's hard. I mean, you're
Yeah.
coming so young,
I
and
remember
it's just a hard
you were
transition, you
concerned.
know?
We were concerned too that they gotta come back, so.
Well, it was so intense that
Yeah,
first year
right,
too, because
right.
I remember coming in and we were taking maybe 8 classes at a time or so, and I think the teachers were told that we were college ready,
Yeah.
and I think the level was a little too high.
It was pretty
for
high.
many-
Looking back now at your experience, is there anything that stands out? You know, there's a lot of things that made an impression. Was there anything that stands out, a great teacher, someone who inspires you in string theory, or other social study breakthroughs?
This is a bit of a general thing, but that has stood out to me for years is that, I mean, I expected that when I came there would be fantastic faculty for math and science. And indeed there were. But I also was very surprised and delighted to learn that there was absolutely fantastic faculty for the humanities.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean,
Those people
Bill
stick with me.
Stepien, Bernie Hollister, all the English faculty, Roberta Cool, Elio
Clark.
Lopez,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Clark,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they were
Zedman.
great. And I don't think either of you know this, but I spent 15 years as a playwright after I got out of college, and it was a lot of that
that
spark
right?
was instilled in me
Wow.
back in those days by
Really?
Babs
Wow.
Taylor and that crowd,
I
and
didn't tell her
even Steve Won. There was a lot of
that.
sort of
Yes,
performance energy and humanities energy, and
Steve Blunt was amazing.
you guys did a great job of
Wow.
making it a place where that you could get a really well-rounded education and be inspired by
yeah.
cross-disciplinary.
All of the faculty were wonderful, and they were also, for that first year, they had to be supportive in more ways than most
Yeah.
high school faculty are not,
With
because we were
Kleenex and
living,
all kinds of
right,
tears
right.
and-
And so, you know, it feels a bit like family that
Mhm,
way.
mhm.
But yeah, the social science, humanities were incredible, and we did so much. One of the appeals for me to come here was just the innovative approach and the cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary approaches. And we were always sort of working outside of the bounds
Mhm.
in the social sciences, always doing the
We'd go in the
plays,
graveyard.
and they were yeah
Field trips and
right.
We've heard
right.
that story 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
great.
amazing. That trip.
Bill Stepien and
Obviously,
Bernie Hollister
yeah.
were fantastic.
Obviously.
Okay,
Like,
how
Real
many
people.
scientists did we turn off?
Well, also, yeah, don't just read The Tempest. Dr. Clark had us all
Right.
directing it
Right.
and putting on scenes from The Tempest for each other.
Right.
And that's the way it should be done.
It just
Absolutely.
encouraged
Yeah.
so much creativity, which I think, you know,
Yeah,
encourages
right.
the scientific
Right.
approach. And for me, that carried through with everything I did, because I ended up getting a doctorate in medical anthropology and psychocultural studies, and my dissertation
Oh, wow.
crossed
Mhm.
psychoneuroimmunology and health psychology and anthropology, and that was a very unique thing. What I recalled is that before we came here, in that July meeting or so, when we were hearing about coming here and still deciding, we were told that the dorms would not be ready for maybe 4 to 6 weeks.
And we really believed that.
And right,
we weren't selling
right,
them
no,
non-goods.
I agree.
Oh.
I think everyone believed that.
Yeah.
And I think we also were told that we'd have no more than 6 or so roommates in a room. And so we show up the first day.
24.
We had 30
You had
in the whole
yeah.
It was
room.
like that Goldie Hawn movie where she joins the army, and we were all like,
Oh,
what
yeah.
are we doing?
8 months.
What's happening?
was it really 8 months that
Yeah.
way?
It was 8 months.
Yeah.
I moved in
Yeah.
last month. So I
And then we
think
thought it was gonna be Thanksgiving, right, and that didn't happen
Yeah.
either,
Right.
so.
Mm.
it was
Yeah.
an intense bonding time, and I wouldn't have traded that. It was very much like boot camp in a way.
It
Just
Lord
the
of the
intensity
Flies,
of the
all the-
academics,
Mhm.
and the fact that there was not. We had to set up all the clubs. We had to set up all the
Yeah.
sports.
Right.
So we didn't
Right.
have those outlets naturally.
It's
So
true.
people got
Right.
creative there.
Yeah, it
too.
was creating our school while
That's
living in it
true,
at the same
right.
time, and that was,
Right.
yeah, it's something that you can't trade. And
Yeah.
I almost feel bad for some of these classes now that they don't have to go through that, because
heard
part
that
of that
too,
was half
yeah.
of our IMSA experience,
Yeah.
you know, that we
Just
got to create our
bootstrapping it.
own.
No,
Yeah.
it was a co-creation, I mean, it really
Yeah.
was, and so you only do that once or twice, you know,
Mhm.
you do that all the time,
Yeah.
wow,
I think we all feel honored to be
Yeah.
able to have done that. I mean, I know I do.
yeah.
Well, I wonder if it's evolved over the years. I
Mhm.
unfortunately haven't. I've lived so far away that
Mhm.
I haven't had a lot of contact. But the IMSA way back then seemed to be. I think it had a lot to do with this cross-disciplinary approach.
Mhm.
It had a lot to do with kind of being willing to kind of open the doors to exploration in a deep way. Like really,
Mhm.
we were really encouraged by teachers not only to discover truths for ourselves that were already sort of waiting out there in their minds to be discovered, but to truly explore as partners with them into a space of
That's the pedagogy piece you asked, yeah.
right.
Okay.
And I think that's extremely rare. I mean,
Mhm.
and certainly at the high school level, and
Yeah.
I think even at the college level, I think that's going to be very rare. So
Mhm.
it has a big influence, to feel like you're empowered to be inventive
Mhm.
with your peers and collaborators into really new space. Well, I wonder if it's evolved over the years. I unfortunately haven't. I've lived so far away that I haven't had a lot of contact. But the IMSA way back then seemed to be. I think it had a lot to do with this cross-disciplinary approach.
Mhm.
It had a lot to do with kind of being willing to kind of open the doors to exploration in a deep way. Like really.
Mhm.
We were really encouraged by teachers not only to discover truths for ourselves that were already sort of waiting out there in their minds to be discovered, but to truly explore as partners with them into a space of
That's the pedagogy piece you asked, yeah.
right.
Okay.
And I think that's extremely rare. I mean,
Mhm.
and certainly at the high school level,
Yeah.
and I think even at the college level, I think that's
Yeah.
going to be very rare. So
Mhm.
it has a big influence, to feel like you're empowered to be inventive
Mhm.
with your peers and collaborators into really new space.
Did you pick teachers, which I didn't know anything about that process, that would be congenial to this sort of thing?
Absolutely.
So each of them was picked with that quality in mind of throwing the textbook on the garbage
There
can.
were two
and-
questions that I always use for faculty.
Mhm.
How does the language that you speak inform and enhance the language of mathematics and science? If it was a humanities person, how does the language that you speak, poetry, whatever it is, inform and enhance the language of mathematics and science? And then conversely, how does the language of biology, whatever, inform and enhance? So it was always a question, and it was the rare faculty person who could answer that question. The people that we hired were typically those who said, that is such a fantastic question, can I think about it and get back to you? So, well, that's a
Yeah.
perfect answer.
Yeah.
Because in some ways I didn't expect people to have an answer. But many said, I never thought of my discipline as a language. I have to really think about that.
Yeah.
But it's sort of your point. So it was very intentional. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a combination. I mean, looking back on it, those teachers had a certain combination of, obviously they were brilliant at pedagogy themselves, but they had a certain humility about being with students, and they had a feeling that this was really an effort to be taken on in cooperation. And it's hard to find somebody who functions at such a high level and who's still willing to step away when they feel like big
So
idea.
there wasn't an expert in the classroom? It was
Well, they certainly
distributed
were.
expertise. They
Right.
were, okay, but.
They were experts, and we looked to them for expertise.
Yeah, there was
Okay.
definitely leadership there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. It
But
wasn't.
they drew energy from us, I think,
Yeah,
and were
okay.
excited to learn from what we were discovering and then enhance their own teaching and excitement as well. It was just like this sort of self-generating energy
Okay,
machine, I
okay.
think, in terms of education, you know?
Mhm.
Well, and I think
They-
they had to be that way because
Yeah.
there were some,
They would've
there were some
gotten
students
rolled
that were
over.
literal geniuses,
right,
Yeah.
right? And
right.
some of us who were smart but worked hard,
Yeah.
and, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, so they were really. You're right. They were really. A lot of the faculty were just able to work with that
Mhm.
challenge and build on it and
Mhm.
encourage the creativity and encourage the pioneering
Mhm.
approach. I think pioneer does fit innovative.
Mhm.
Mm.
I think there's a reason that what we call the pits in the school are so symbolic to us, and it's because, I mean, I remember being so fascinated the first time that I walked into a class and they announced that if it was a language class I was in or an English class, they announced that we were literally joining some other math class or some other class from that day, and like we would converge in the pit and have a couple of like co-classes together where the subject matter would cross over, or all of the conversations we had in there and all the club meetings. And it was, I mean, in terms of the IMSA way, it's just this bringing together all of these people, all of these thoughts from different disciplines, and they would all assemble in this sort of like town center that would be, the pit,
Huh,
or,
that's
all
great,
of
yeah.
us living together too is such a key part of making that kind of, I think,
Huh.
educational magic happen. And I don't know, to me it's just somewhat symbolic of all that. But.
Huh. When you look at your careers now, do you see any seeds? I mean, do you personally attribute the IMSA experience and what you were allowed to do and encouraged to do and hear? Do you see any seeds that link right to who you have become and what you're doing now with your life? You've alluded to that in your playwriting, and you certainly have in your research.
I certainly have. I mean, there are many ways to answer that question. The first thing that comes to mind, though, actually, is that in terms of my parenting, I feel like I have a 13-year-old son,
Oh, okay.
and I am very adamant that he get not just a good education, but that kind of education.
Oh, okay.
And he's very bright, thankfully. Or, I mean, I would love him anyway. But but it's great to have enough of an understanding of when I go into parent-teacher meetings. It's like, here's what I need this to be like, and if you can't do that, then we'll have
You're
more
the parent
conversations.
from hell,
Yeah.
right?
I am.
Parent conference, okay.
I mean, I'm not unreasonable, but I want him to feel like there's that kind of education is available to him.
How many of your plays were produced?
All of them.
All of them?
Yeah, well, I produced them myself.
That's the IMSA way right there. Make it
That's
happen.
great. Where do they get produced?
In Austin, Texas, and sometimes in New York a little bit. Yeah.
Oh,
That's great.
Wow, that is great.
Well, I work in advertising, so I don't know if I can draw a direct line to it, but in some ways, I think you gain just a lot of insight into society and culture through all the things that we studied here. And I actually was an art history major, and a lot of that I attribute to Dr. Clark in English, even though it was English. But I remember when we graduated and I was going out to Wellesley College in Boston, and he made me promise that within the first month of getting there that I would find the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, that I would go there, I would sit in the courtyard, and I would think about my IMSA experience before I launched into my next one. And that became my place of peace and solace in Boston. Whenever I had to figure something out, I would go and sit in that courtyard and think about him and think about just a lot of the experiences that we had in terms of education. And I still go back when I visit Boston and I try and get there. And I realized just the art in there and all of the lessons and everything. And I became an art history major, which actually had a lot of influence on my career in advertising in terms of being able to analyze things and understand society and culture. And that was made an important part of our studies here. And so it doesn't seem like it might be a direct line, but this place has influenced everything that I've done in education and the way that I think, just the way that I think as a human being, I think.
You were the reason for everything, so. it
one of
was
the
wonderful.
first words my new senator said to me, his name was Obama. This the other guy was involved with that school out there in Aurora.
Oh, yeah.
So he knew about it.
Oh, that's nice to know.
And I hope he's continuing to know
Oh,
about
yeah,
it.
he knows a lot about it.
Wow.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. So this is part of our oral history. Is there anything you want to say, just for the record?
For the record.
For the record.
Or just,
This place is amazing. I mean, it needs to stay open. I'm just grateful is just the only word that comes to mind. It's the singular most fantastic educational experience that I've had. I mean, I went to a very well-respected college. It was great, but nothing can quite compare to the unique experience that we had here and started here, and I'm just honored to have been a part of it.
Yeah.
That's very true. When I go to colleges all over the place, there's always
Well,
near
we were
miss.
talking about the bus down to Springfield
Yeah.
that year.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, that was this class went down.
this was
Yeah.
the class.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah,
right.
I went to
Yes, and Neil
Springfield.
Oh,
Clark
yeah, they were gonna give us
together
just
a,
enough money to finish up,
Well, they gave us half.
yeah.
You know, the deal was, the handshake that I had the first year was, you add a class a year and we'll increase your dollars, and they didn't do that. And so the recommendation was just uninvite the second class. And I said to the board, my recommendation, it was the board's decision, but my recommendation is we run till the money runs out and we close on December 31st if we don't get our money. And I was very serious about that. Most people thought I was not, but I was very serious. Because I said to the General Assembly, if children and their families can't trust the word of this institution, you don't have an institution. So just end it right now. If you're gonna do this all the time, it's so unfair to the families and the kids. So just end it right now. And, we'll go back, we'll go on our way. But that's not what happened. But I do think you guys coming, I mean, we brought
yeah,
everybody to
yeah.
Springfield. And Neil Clark, when we got on the bus, he had made an aluminum foil dog. And he called it the IMSA Dog and Pony Show. That's great. Of course, only Dr. Clark would think of
Yeah.
that, so it was great.
That's right.
He called every radio station and television station, and you guys were talking to legislators, so it's a
Mhm.
great success story.
Well, we
Near
were
miss-
talking about the bus down to Springfield
Yeah.
that year.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, that was this class went down.
That was this was
Yeah.
the class.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah, I
right.
went to
Yes, and Neil
Springfield.
Clark
Oh, yeah, they were gonna give us
together
just
a,
enough money to finish up,
Well, they gave us half.
yeah.
The deal was, the handshake that I had the first year was, you add a class a year and we'll increase your dollars, and they didn't do that. And so the recommendation was just uninvite the second class. And I said to the board, my recommendation, it was the board's decision, but my recommendation is we run till the money runs out and we close on December 31st if we don't get our money. And I was very serious about that. Most people thought I was not, but I was very serious. Because I said to the General Assembly, if children and their families can't trust the word of this institution, you don't have an institution. So just end it right now. If you're gonna do this all the time, it's so unfair to the families and the kids. So just end it right now. And, we'll go back, we'll go on our way. But that's not what happened. But I do think you guys coming, I mean, we brought
yeah,
everybody to
yeah.
Springfield. And Neil Clark, when we got on the bus, he had made an aluminum foil dog. And he called it the IMSA Dog and Pony Show. That's great. Of course, only Dr. Clark would think of
Yeah.
that, so it was great.
That's right.
He called every radio station and television station, and you guys were talking to legislators, so it's a
Mhm.
great success story. But
Well, we're grateful for it.
we couldn't have done it without you. You were the reason for everything. We couldn't have done it without you. You were the reason for everything, so. it
One of
was
the
wonderful.
first words my new senator said to me, his name was Obama. This the other guy was involved with that school out there in Aurora.
Oh, yeah.
So he knew about it.
Oh, that's nice to
And
know.
I hope he's continuing to know
Oh,
about
yeah, he
it.
knows a lot about it.
Wow.
Yeah, he does.